Our first talk up today is Walter Johnson with the FCC. He's going to give us an update on their Measuring Broadband America program. Very much looking forward to this presentation. Walter.
Okay. All right. It's a pleasure to be here. The last NANOG session I attended, I think, was in 2011, probably about half this size. I also attended the social last night. I met two people. One was from the sponsor of the social. I'd never heard of the Federal Communications Commission. I sat down next to somebody who commented she'd never met anybody from the Federal Communications Commission. I've been with the Federal Communications Commission almost 10 years now. When I started, people would come in and they would say, "Don't touch the internet." Okay. By the way, we're chartered with ensuring the health of the communications infrastructure of the United States. That's the whole purpose of the agency. More recently, people are coming in and telling us to save the internet. So times do change. A standard disclaimer: these are my viewpoints, not those of necessarily the Federal Communications Commission. And I'm talking about a program we started in 2010, which was unusual for the FCC, that we became interested in measuring broadband performance. I'm going to go over this at a very high level. I reported out on this, as I said, in 2011 with at an add-on presentation. But the point I want to make is that this was a very novel experiment at the time for the FCC, but an indication of how important we thought broadband was, that we wanted to start understanding actual broadband performance. We wound up placing hardware monitors in the homes of volunteers. We do this on an annual basis now. We have 7,000 volunteers on any given year that participate in an annual report that we produce. We measure typical metrics: up, down speeds, latency, packet loss, and other parameters. In our last report, we started to introduce the concept of consistency of service. We are interested increasingly not just in the speed, but the quality of service that end users are experiencing. That's very important in today's environment as customer patterns, usage patterns change. This is a collaborative effort with industry and others. One of the things that makes our study unique is that the rates that we are measuring are validated by the internet service providers themselves. So we measure a specific speed, but it's compared against a rate that's audited by the ISP. The ISPs that participate in the study represent well over 80% of the United States. The focus is on the most popular speeds, and that we don't do every speed tier, but we cover probably about 80 to 85% of the consumers within a specific ISP. Since our first report, we now include all the major technologies, and last year we've been focusing on satellite as they've put up Ka-band satellites. Ka-band, for those of you not familiar with the technology, has about 10 times the capacity of the previous generation, and in fact the first satellite that put into commercial service by Viasat had the equivalent capacity of all the existing digital satellites at that in time. And for those interested in the program specifically, I'd urge you to go to our website. We have a much more detailed description of what we're doing, how we're doing it. We're presently committed to an annual report based upon a typical sample month. That month is nominally September. It's actually, in terms of a practical working experience, the months of September, October. We need a minimum by policy of about 25 days worth of data collected without any network impairments in our measurement structure. We're likely to extend the period this time around because of congestion in our network testing infrastructure based upon what we believe to be the iOS 8 release that consumed about 2 weeks. This past weekend, actually last weekend, we saw a great diminishing in congestion associated with our servers. This is an open data program that we run, and again, unusual for a government agency, but increasingly the norm, I should say. We produce a text-based report which goes out to everybody. We also produce a spreadsheet of every statistical measure that we have in our report. We release all the data that constituted the report. This is gigabytes worth of data, so anything that was used to produce our report can be revalidated by other researchers. We also release what we call the unvalidated data set. When we sample, there's some data that's necessarily thrown away because of anomalies. For example, a customer might move. We have a requirement that a hardware monitor be operating for the duration of the study. Sometimes they go dark. But all that data is still made available to the public, and we have a full and expanding description of our methodology that we use. And all the decisions we've made in this program from the beginning are made in an open forum. So you have service providers, academics, vendors, consumer advocates, and at times when there's been controversy, the press. We know we're doing well when there's no press in attendance. So what's been the impact of this? We've been pleased to see that there's been a noticeable improvement in service over the 3 years of the program. Most ISPs now deliver pretty close or better to what they're claiming they're going to deliver to the consumer. And we've also seen some narrowing between the best and worst performers. Having said that, my personal guess is that we're probably about the limits of what we're going to see in terms of improvements. A majority of the companies are delivering 100% or better of what they're claiming. And that's probably, it's going to be topped out in terms of what we're likely to see. The reports are highlighted by news sources in terms of best and worst performers. Some ISPs, not all, incorporate the results in their advertising. Strangely enough, it's only the better performing ISPs that cite these results. We really have come to believe that putting this information out is beneficial to everybody. It's certainly beneficial to the consumer, but it also spurs a much higher degree of competition among the ISPs. And also the data is utilized in a number of papers presented at conferences. We've been very pleased to see that our data is incorporated in other people's work and presented at various policy conferences and technical conferences. And it's also helped inform the FCC on policy issues itself. We basically started this program as a sort of a report card for ISPs, but we're turning it over time more into a baseline for broadband evolution. We're trying to get data that better informs the Federal Communications Commission on how broadband is evolving. We're seeing that speeds are increasing greater than 30% annually. More recently, and interestingly, legacy consumer equipment is concerning us. Last year, our program faced the fact that some of the cable modems that were still being used by consumers were not capable of supporting the speeds that ISPs were beginning to offer. More recently, routers in the home have become a problem. Another thing we've noticed is that as consumers buy higher speeds, they actually do consume more data, and there's an issue of productivity associated with that. Something that has concerned us is that DSL as a technology does not seem to be keeping up with either fiber or cable. 3 years ago, we were measuring DSL speeds, which are the same as we're measuring today. That doesn't say DSL speeds have not increased, but the speeds that people commonly buy has not increased with DSL. So this is something we're starting to pay attention to. And for the first time, we're starting to see an increase in upload speeds. As speeds get higher and higher, we're starting to see that some ISPs are offering increasing this, upload speeds, some significantly, such as Fios. We've run this program for 3 years now, and we're starting to evolve it to different directions. We're doing new traffic analysis. We're trying to partner with other organizations, and we've also started a mobile program. When we began this program in planning over 4 years ago, consumers were using BitTorrent, browsing, and email. Okay. Consumer usage now is all about video streaming. And video streaming is dependent on what I would call enduring quality of service. You've got to have consistent service over the viewing experience of the consumer, or else the consumer is not being satisfied. Average speed is not a good indicator of quality of service. And we've been working with Netflix and others to develop video streaming tests to be deployed across our platform. This was based upon a proof of concept we did with YouTube. with work adopted from research at Aalto University in Finland. Inadvertently, I guess without a lot of planning, we've deployed a fairly extensive test network. This was supposed to originally be a one-year project, and 3 years later, we've looked back and said we've got up to 9,000 homes wired with hardware monitors. We have an extensive server network. We have access links connecting us to those networks. We've deployed over 13,000 boxes in total. As I said, 7,000 remain active in any given year for testing. And an additional 2,000 remain active but don't make it into the program, either because they're no longer in speed tiers that we're reporting on, and some are phantom boxes. They show up at new locations. They travel to distant lands, and we call it the eBay effect. Okay? And our program requires at most 3 months of platform utilization. So in other words, to produce our report, takes us about 3 months of network usage. We generally try to validate the network, and that takes about 1 month to make sure it's up and running correctly. We do 1 month of testing, and there may be a spillover effect if we have problems into the succeeding month. So it's led us to look at what we can do with the network and how we might partner with outside entities. We've been approaching various research institutions to see if there's any interest in leveraging our platform for research purposes. We started the program working with universities like MIT and Georgia Tech. We've continued the work with Georgia Tech. We're actually sponsoring a study that they're doing using our facilities, looking at home congestion. So they've got a test script they're running on our network, trying to see if when congestion occurs, is it an artifact of the network or is it an artifact of the home? We were reaching out to other universities to see if there are similar opportunities. We're trying to understand if there are additional reports we can do that would be of interest to various stakeholders. And where we've been asked, we've provided data in support of research. We're doing some work with Casey Claffey at KIDA, and we're providing, ultimately we'll provide her with some latency measures based upon our hardware monitors. In short, we're looking to leverage the investment in our network in any reasonable way to increase the value and provide more insight on the evolving internet. About 2 years ago, we became interested in mobile broadband, and our goal was to extend our program to include mobile services. And we based that effort on what we, on our initial program, and incorporate aspects of collaboration and open data from our existing fixed program. We began working with AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, and CTIA, which is the trade association for the cellular industry. Our major issues were consumer privacy and the methodology we were going to use. Consumer privacy was our biggest concern, actually. Mobile data can expose the life of an individual. We worked with the Federal Trade Commission, service providers, and outside experts to develop a privacy policy, clear explanation to the consumer of what is collected, a fully anonymized collection of data, rules for data release that require possible transformations of the data or thresholds to be released, and FCC published results to be based on publicly releasable data. So a tougher standard than we had for the fixed program. In terms of methodology, we looked at two approaches, crowdsourcing and drive testing. Crowdsourcing measures the actual user experience. It's the only survey methodology which actually measures what users actually get in terms of performance. It's easily scalable. It's the most common method, I believe, by which users are informed of performance. Most, not all, of the companies that inform on speed use crowdsourcing as an approach. The nasty part of that is the results not easily repeatable, and the statistics can be questioned because you're basing your results on a small sample set of users. Drive testing has the opposite. Its results are very repeatable, and it's possible to derive good statistical data, but only for the points that you're measuring. And those are very few points measured typically once every 6 months or once every year. Consumer experience is inferred through various modeling techniques, and it's also very expensive to scale, which is why typically it's done 1 point every 6 months or 1 point every year on a grid-like, typically on some sort of statistically driven grid-based approach. We concluded there's no perfect way to measure broadband performance. We chose crowdsourcing. It was the most cost-efficient for our purposes. We're a very low-budget project. It is actual consumer experience, and it's in line with many privately released studies. We developed 2 clients. Android client was released in November of 2013. The iPhone client was released in February 2014. If you go to either Google Play or iTunes and look for FCC speed test, you'll find it. We've gotten fairly high marks for the application. My favorite comment from a user was very useful and surprisingly not ugly, which if you're a government agency, that's very high praise. In fact, if you're going on a date, it's very high praise. The clients provide the current test results and history to the consumer and permits the results to be uploaded to the network. Android, which we really like, provides automatic testing, so we do background testing automatically, and provides more network data. The volunteer can set the data limits on data testing. So one of the things the volunteer can do is basically decide how much bandwidth they're going to dedicate to this program. We are in the process of developing a mapping platform. It's nearly finished. It'll be finished actually this month. It permits a daily update of the data, so it's almost living data in that respect. And we would expect over time to have no more than a year and no less than 6 months worth of data displayed on the platform. And as in our fixed program, underlying data will be available. So anything that constitutes the maps will be released as an open data program. Data collected, the typical up, down speed, latency, packet loss, also metadata in terms of things like the bearer channel, whether it's LTE, whether it's HSPDA plus or CDMA, cell tower ID and location. Data released subject to a privacy policy, so location data and timestamps will be transformed to try to eliminate breadcrumbs. The interesting part of this program is it started out as a consumer-focused program, but it is impacting in other areas of the FCC. For example, we subsidize the deployment of broadband technology in high-cost areas, and some of the methodology that we developed is being used to audit or propose to audit ISPs that accept money from the Federal Communications Commission for deploying broadband. We're trying to evolve the program with the needs of the public and the Commission. We remain committed to transparency. This is an open data program, an open methodology. The mobile client, for example, is released as open source. We're transitioning to baseline reporting of internet characteristics. We're no longer focused on establishing who's the best and who's the worst, but trying to understand basic trends in the internet. And we're seeking other evolution objectives. We are likely to start testing on a DNSSEC program probably next year. We're interested in what we can do with IPv6, and we're soliciting ideas from anybody in the technical community as to how we can better inform the public about significant broadband trends and aspects. All right, thank you very much. We got time for questions?
We have time for questions. Down the middle.
It's as good as the wireless. Randy Bush, IIJ. In one of my lives, I'm a measurement researcher, so I applaud the measurements and having tools to actually get the real details of what's going on. But IIJ stands for Internet Initiative Japan, and I live in Tokyo. And I'm reminded of a Bob Dylan line, "You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows." And this is a third world country as far as broadband goes. I pay $35 a month for 100 megabit up, down, measured. And that's being fixed because it's considered culturally broken. We're now getting installed gigabit to the home all over Tokyo. Wake up here.
So, Warren Kamari, Google. I'm a little confused about some of the measurements and results. One of the things you said is that almost everybody is getting the speeds that they pay for from their ISP. And that's not what I hear from people that I speak to. Is there anybody in the room who actually thinks they're getting what they pay for? I mean, these are network engineers, right? They're people who do testing on stuff. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't think that they're getting what they pay for and has run some sort of test? It doesn't look like almost everybody is happy with what they're getting. Can you explain sort of where the difference is?
Sure. Let me break it into three parts. Okay. The previous questioner raised the issue of, are they getting as much as they should be getting for what they pay for? That's a different question. Okay, and I really can't address that. This is an open data program, and we started this with a great deal of skepticism in terms of what the average person gets. At the time this program was started, there was a belief fueled by reports based on mostly in Europe, but a couple of reports in the United States that said that consumers were getting perhaps no more than half of what they were being promised. Might be too strong a term, but suggested speeds were actually no more. The actual speeds were no more than half of what the advertised speeds were likely to be. When the first year we did this report, for most ISPs, not all, we found that on average, and I emphasize on average, consumers were getting about 80% of what they were being advertised. That's closer to 100%. That doesn't say that there's not variability in the data, and on our last report, we're trying to emphasize now how data varies. But we've published our results. We've made the data available to the public. We've had researchers looking at our results. I think the results have held up over time, so that if you want to focus on averages, okay, on average, the ISPs do actually meet, on average, the performance that they're advertising. That doesn't say the service for every application is satisfactory. It doesn't say that during peak hours, if you're trying to watch House of Cards, you're going to be able to do that successfully. This past year, we had a confrontation between content providers and ISPs, which affected the consumer. Okay, but putting that aside, on average, the consumers are getting what they're advertised. All right, so I'll leave it at that. The results, you know, the numbers are available for anybody to inspect, and we've had actually people come in and say, we don't believe what you're saying. Give us the data, and we'll disprove what you're saying. Data's available.
Hi, Steve Schechter, Akamai. So are the ISPs aware of where these probes are deployed in their network?
Yes, they are. Well, they can be.
So
Yes.
Thanks for answering the question. And what's being done to prevent gaming of the system?
We had a lot of discussion about that in the first year. We basically talked about strategies we could employ. Nobody on the team, and when I say on the team, none of the academics, none of the commission staff, none of the consumer advocates, and certainly, and don't laugh at this, none of the ISPs came up with a foolproof method. We instituted a code of conduct. Most of these companies, by the way, value their reputation. So to be caught in outright fraud is a two-pronged problem. One, it does affect them in a highly competitive environment. And two, the commission would take some action. What that action would be, I'm not sure. The first year that we issued the report, one of the ISPs was delivering 50%, actually at times less than 50% of what they were promising. There are ISPs whose performance is not all that great. Typically, DSL suppliers have a great variance in their performance because they advertise a single number, and the actual performance is dependent upon loop length. There's an element of trust in this, but we tend to believe the results are open, honest, and there's a huge risk for companies to basically get that dumb over something which, in this respect, is trivial. If there was $10 billion at stake, I'd be less confident, but this is a question of risk-reward.
Yeah. It's definitely helping people plan their upgrades. So, thanks.
I think we're over here first.
Hi,
This side.
Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable. Thanks again, Walter. Always, love to see the work that you're doing. When you were talking about the average speeds observed, I think there's a difference between peak and off-peak, because earlier you'd said that many ISPs are delivering more than 100% of what they offer. I think you said that.
Yes.
And presumably off-peak, right?
We actually focus, when we started this report, we focused on peak speed. So all our numbers, we carry all the numbers through in our study, but what we report on in terms of the headline numbers are always peak speeds.
Okay.
Because it's when users want to use the service.
And at the end there, you're talking about sort of the future possibilities, and you mentioned IPv6. So I thought I would ask, is there an FCC position, or is there a public policy, either a public policy or a concern about the exhaustion of the free pool at ARIN of IPv4 addresses?
There's no public position on the FCC on this issue that I'm aware of.
Should there be?
The FCC is getting increasingly concerned about the evolution and health of the internet. We've got 4 million comments into us this year alone in terms of making sure the internet stays healthy and vibrant.
Right.
Over here.
Hi, Adam Rothschild, Packet Host. Firstly, thank you very much for being here and getting this out in the open, very informative. Have 2 questions. One is, do you have any mailing list or community fora for discussing your test methodology?
No, that's something we haven't started, although it's something that we'd be open to considering.
I, as a community member, think that would be very beneficial. And second is, has the commission considered performing speed tests to servers located off a provider's network, for instance, on a backbone provider or at a hosting provider, to basically measure more accurately end user experience?
We do, actually, the report itself is based on servers which are provided both by MLab as well as Level 3. Those are off-net servers in that respect. But the carriers themselves have about 100 servers they also bring into the fray, and they're used for auditing purposes. So, and actually were initially installed at a Paranoia. So when we started this program, the carriers insisted on the ability to be able to monitor the results to make sure that the results were valid from their perspective. So when we started this, they put servers just about everywhere they could in their networks. They've, in hindsight, give us a valuable ability to see if the network is being impacted over links, shared links to our servers. For example, one of the ways that we identified there was extensive iOS 8 traffic is that we could compare on-net and off-net traffic, and we saw some disparities being created over links, and not all links were affected by iOS 8, but there were specific links that were impacted and actually degraded our ability to test. So the typical test we do is to the first off-net internet access point.
Would definitely like to see more research towards identifying disparity between on-net and off-net, as well as making the off-net sample base more robust. But thank you.
Well, let me just add one other thing. We're to a point in this program where we're trying to expand it beyond its original intent. So I'll try to set up some sort of thread in terms of discussion, but we're openly soliciting right now good ideas that we could implement or others might implement. We're trying to do 2 things. We're trying to evolve our methodology where we can, and we're looking for partnering opportunities where other people could use our resources or work with us. So we're open to anything that benefits the public.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.